massive disappointment for El Tri. They're out of the World Cup, and once again they bow out in the round of 16 for the 7th consecutive World Cup. It's now all of 32 years since the Mexican side made it to the quarter-finals. Brazil, on the other hand, well, they're very used to the rarefied atmosphere of the quarter-final stages of the World Cup. They are in it for the 7th consecutive time, so 7 maybe Mexico's unlucky number. Well, it's got to be Brazil's lucky number. The keeper played his part in keeping Mexico in it for a long time, but ultimately the class won out, and Keith, very deserved quarter-finalists, Brazil.
Very much so. In the end, deserved it. Weathered a slight storm in the opening 25 minutes. And if Brazil had the attacking players, if Mexico had the attacking players that Brazil possessed, because of the opportunities they had in the first, that they would have taken advantage of those. Brazil done that in the second half. Willian and Neymar, I thought, were outstanding in the second half. They were probably the difference. But you can see what it means to the Mexican fans.
Yeah.
They've given a great account of themselves, but they've fallen short against a team that have shown in glimpses what they're capable of. Yeah,
Mexico is a magnificent footballing nation, and they hosted 2 of the best World Cups in memory, that's for sure. Well, I remember them. 1970 and 1986. And hope you obviously know. I mean, there are a lot of Mexicans playing football in the United States, but it's very much part of their culture, and there'll be huge disappointment now as a result of this.
It is, but they have a lot to be proud of.
Sure, yeah.
Towards the end of the game, you continue to see players attack. There were too many outside shots, I believe, and I think Juan Carlos Osorio actually made a tactical error by using 3 subs a little bit too early in the game. But Mexico has a lot to be proud of. They kept attacking towards the end of the game. So I think their nation will be happy, as well as the Mexican Americans living in America.
Yeah. What about Mexico, Richie? I mean, to get this far once again and to start the tournament on a high like that against Germany, but there must be a missing ingredient, is there?
They started the tournament on a high. They beat Germany for the first time in the World Cup. They spoke before this about their hopes and their optimism about beating Brazil for the first time. They will go home, obviously, having gone no further than the previous 6 or 7 tournaments, and on paper that would look like a disappointment. But as Hope said, I think there were so many positive things to their performance. There was no sign at all that, you know, some countries are in club football, they get to a certain point and you think, well, psychologically they don't have what it takes, they freeze or they bottle it. There was no sign of that from this Mexican side at all. They started off like a house on fire for a half an hour. Even when they conceded the goal, I said at half time I'd be looking to see how that would impact them. There was no sign of them being inhibited. They didn't allow Brazil to take dominance of the game. They still tried to get forward in numbers, but as Keith said, they just lacked a real clinical cutting edge up front. But so much of that was aspects they can take hard from, but yet again they're going home.
They came in under tricky circumstances as well, let's not forget. So overall I think the tournament has been a success. The only flaw has been the last group game against Sweden. Let themselves down, and if they had got the better of them in that game, they'd be facing Switzerland as opposed to Brazil. 2 different dynamics, obviously.
Yeah, they certainly didn't have the look as far as that was concerned, but it's Brazil who march on to the quarter-finals, and they remain firm favourites for the 2018 World Cup. And Hope, as I'm looking through the graph that we have plotting the various routes to the final, and the fact that countries like Spain are gone, the Portuguese are gone, Argentina are gone, Brazil, their favourites tag is getting stronger and stronger by the day, isn't it?
Well, I think they have a huge task ahead of them when they meet France in the semifinals. So that's going to be probably the game of the tournament to watch, and it could go either way.
Well, of course, the thing is they have to get past Belgium to end up.
I'm looking ahead.
And
the game of the tournament.
You're just missing a very strong European side there.
Will be France versus Brazil.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right, that's where your money's going. Keith, what do you think? I mean, Brazil, you were saying at the outset that they've grown into the tournament. Did they grow even further today?
There's a few things worried me. Paulinho, which I'll touch on later, his role within the team and playing against better opposition, leaving Casemiro a little bit isolated, and he's of course going to miss the next one, so Fernandinho will come in. Full-backs in the first half look very, very poor defensively. Fagner and Filipe Luis look like you can get at them, absolutely get at them. And again, against better players, which Belgium do possess, that would also worry me. On the flip side of that, going forward, I thought Neymar looked his best today that he has in the tournament. Looked very, very sharp in patches. Fitness levels, sharpness is well and truly back.
OK, I was going to say, Richie, and there were no histrionics, but of course there were. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. But first of all, we're going to have a look at that Neymar goal. And it came after a surging run by Willian.
It's just the injection of pace from Neymar. Again, good build-up play. Coutinho dropping into those little pockets of space, and he feeds him, and it's here. Dropping the shoulder, driving inside. Coutinho gets out of his way. Willian, I love this. Driving, direct, positive. And look at the numbers they have going forward, committing into the box, not on the periphery. He attracts 3 players. That's when you know it's a good player. Release the ball. Willian was fantastic. It goes over Salcedo. Ochoa can't really do too much about it, but the desire by Neymar to get into that area, Jesus ever so close to getting it, and I think he looks back to his best. OK, and we thought Firmino would come on in the second half, Richie, and he did, and proved his worth in the box with that late security goal, I suppose you'd call it.
This is one of the strengths of this Brazil squad, is the quality they have to come off the bench. Again, you give a player like Neymar this amount of space. The game was getting a little bit stressed at this point. Perfectly weighted pass. He's clearly onside. And just there, he's obviously going to go himself. And it was just the ricochet, just the deflection off Ochoa's left foot, knocked the ball perfectly into Firmino's path. But that's Neymar at his best. That's what you want him. The ball at his feet, running at defenders. He'll frighten the life out of everyone. He's so difficult to defend against, because if you go close to him, he can drop a shoulder either way, use both feet. Lightning fast kind of decision making and ability on the ball. There is another side to his game which is frustrating to accept, but that's him at his best. And that's another 90 minutes under his belt, which in his physical fitness is been the talking point leading up to it, whatever about his attitude or his personality, but that's been a big positive for them. He's come through every game.
Yeah, for a long time it was a frustration with Ronaldo, the histrionics he carried on with during his career, which he has almost ruled out of his game, but Neymar has been at it during... not quite fully yet, but Neymar was at it again today, and unfortunately it does detract from a great player, doesn't it?
I think some bit, we're supposed to speak about the incidents first of all. It's Layun. You can see Layun's right foot clearly stamping, if that's maybe too strong a word, on Neymar's right ankle. It's difficult to tell from the pictures the weight of pressure he applied onto the ankle. Looking at Neymar's reaction, it would appear that he applied a hell of a lot of pressure and it did a great deal of damage to Neymar. I actually think Layun should have been cautioned or sent off. That you can't be doing that. But the reaction of Neymar, some people, like you just mentioned there, will say someone of that playing ability shouldn't lower himself to behaving like that. But I don't think it's anything to do with ability. It's a personality thing. He's obviously wired in such a way that he's absolutely okay seeking an advantage or attempting to seek an advantage in a match by trying to con a referee, by trying to stitch up an opponent, by falsely making out that he's been hurt more than he has been. That's a personality thing. That's not a playing ability thing. So I don't know how you mentioned there Ronaldo in time and maybe with age, his behaviour change. I don't know how you forcibly remove it from someone. If you can apply pressure within a dressing room, if you have a manager or a coach or senior players in your team, they can stamp their authority, they can create a culture, and they can say, like, this kind of behaviour, that's not what we stand for, it's not what we're about.
Yes.
Clearly that doesn't seem to be either being said by the people around him, or if it is, he's ignoring it. So it's a kind of... It's traits that we're going to see again and again, I think.
Yeah, but I suppose, Hope, isn't it a situation where, when it's a really talented player like that, management are more inclined to tolerate it without saying too much and upsetting him? Because if it was a poor player, he'd be told pretty quickly, don't do that again.
Perhaps, but I beg to differ. I think it might be a little bit of a cultural thing, part of South American football and part of Brazilian football. You see time and time again, this personality exists in South American football. And it may be one player, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 players, but these antics, they happen and they're accepted. And I don't think the manager has told Neymar to knock it off. You're too good for this.
Yeah.
And I think it's unacceptable for Neymar because he's too talented of a player.
Yeah, because I was reading some comments by the manager, Keith, prior to today's game, and he was nothing but wholesome and fulsome in his praise of Neymar. So as far as he was concerned, there wasn't a negative aspect to his game, despite the nonsense.
Look, he's looking at the bigger picture here. Sure. He needs Neymar up to full speed and feeling loved to get the best out of him, and then also the team, obviously, because he is the world beater. He is, if they won, they can get him up to speed and firing on all cylinders. He has the capabilities to fire them to a World Cup. So that's what he's thinking of. He's not thinking about the bigger picture of Neymar, the individual, and maturing him in the right way. It'd be different at club level, but he certainly hasn't had that at club level either this year.
Yeah, he appears to be his behaviour is indulged wherever he goes, whether it's off the field or on the field, because of his talent, because of his importance to this Brazilian team and to the wider Brazilian football. But even with PSG, a load of reports about how he lives his life off the field. Any manager with any authority or any senior players within the dressing room would come out and criticise him, or would internally criticise him. None of that is happening because of his status at the club. So, and this is a wider discussion about, you know, how do you balance the potential of a player with your responsibility to support his development in certain ways. But he's the player he is. He's great to watch. His talent is extraordinary. Like, you go back 4 years ago, he was 22, I think, had the weight of expectation on his shoulders in Brazil in the World Cup, and was outstanding.
Yeah, Hope, is it more and more the case that we hear managers saying that they have to treat the modern day player almost with kid gloves, that they can't handle any criticism, constructive or otherwise? I mean, is that a culture in football now, do you think?
I think the best managers handle each individual player differently. They should not be treated the same. I don't believe in that. I think we all need to be handled differently. There's bigger personalities. However, like I said, you know, we all know now that Neymar can perform under pressure. There's no doubt about that. But it is still unacceptable, these antics that he's doing. And for me, it takes away from the game. And for somebody who loves football the way Neymar does, and he plays with that passion and that excitement, he loves the game. So for somebody to love the game that much and then to deter, to take away from it, it's disappointing, and it takes away the excitement of the game for me. Yeah,
it's definitely a blot on his copybook. And Keith, I don't know, I don't want you to put a manager's hat on or anything like that, but let's say you were a manager and you felt this was proving to be something of a distraction. How would you handle Neymar? I mean, would you reprimand him?
I would try and curb this type of crap that he's coming up with time and time again. What I would indulge from him is the lack of trapping back, constantly going with fullbacks time after time, because I want his energy the top end of the pitch. So that's what I would give him leeway with. With this type of stuff, you have to iron that out. It's not acceptable. It's a portrayal of your team in a negative fashion, and that needs to be curbed. So he has to speak to him on a one-to-one basis, get the captain involved. And I know he's had a few captains, he rotated the armband, the senior players, and just say, look, you need to knock this on the head. But it's clearly in him. He clearly likes doing it.
Yeah. So
I don't think it's overly beneficial. I don't know if he's gained much an advantage by doing that. He's tried in that attempt there to get the opponent booked. We saw footage from the earlier group game where he went down. Do you remember he was touched? And VAR officials come in and said, just get up and get on with it. That's a dive. Like, had he stayed on his feet, in that example, he would have got a shot and goal. So he's seeking an advantage, or trying to get an advantage by playing in this way. I don't think he particularly does. I think he's more of a magnet to get kicked. You know, we know he's the most foul player at the World Cup so far. You can see why. He delays on the ball longer. You mentioned the point earlier. He delays on it longer, which means he's more open to be a target. And he plays in the way that winds up defenders. So he's going to continue to get kicked. So we'll continue to see reactions like that as if he's been shot. But
I was worried about him. I mean, you have to admit, he is a great actor. I bought it.
Yeah, I bought it up as far as the point where he started hammering the ground. And when they do that, you know it's contrived and it's made up. But, well, Neymar has his flaws, unquestionably, but he's going to be key for Brazil if they are going to go on and win it, isn't he, Hope?
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. And we saw his best game tonight of the tournament, and I suspect we're going to see even more from him. So, you know, my hat goes off to him in that respect, and I do believe he is a leader of his team on the field in the way that he plays and in the passion that he brings. And his team kind of thrives off of that energy. So he's going to be a key player moving forward. Yeah,
and let's hope the positives of his abilities certainly outweigh some of the flaws in his character. Let's move on, because Mexico, they certainly made a game of it. They hung on in there, and Hope, much of that was down to the performance of Ochoa. Some great saves in the first half, and he continued to show good form in the second half.
Absolutely. You'll see his saves here. It's a very solid performance by Ochoa, but like I say, goalkeepers cannot win games. They can keep you in the game. They can give you an opportunity to win it yourself by your attacking play. But look at this, save after save by Ochoa. Good positioning, good angles. And he even had great distribution.
Yeah, and also a lot of the shots that came at him were like that one from inside the box. That was another super save. Yeah, Ochoa, one of the stars for Mexico. He can certainly go home with his head held high after this World Cup, but it wasn't enough, of course, to keep them in it. And Richie, time and again, Brazil were pouring forward, and they dominated that second half to a huge extent and created so many chances.
They did, in addition to the ones we've just shown. Neymar here with a short corner kick to look for a 2v1, but Coutinho gets in the box again, another save by Ochoa. But what I really like about this Brazil team, I mean, we expected this side to their game. Willian, who I thought was superb in the second half, created all sorts of difficulties for Mexico. Neymar there just shoots wise. They've a defensive solidity. And there was footage of actually about 12 minutes before the end of the game. I kind of cringed first when I saw it. There was defenders high-fiving each other because the fullback made a tackle. It's footage we're used to seeing from the Juventus defenders.
Very Italian thing to do.
In particular. So this idea that if anyone has any kind of romantic, old-fashioned, cliched views about Brazilian football, that it's all about flicks and tricks and entertaining, this squad isn't. It's been a long time since Brazil was just about that. Absolutely, that's part of their culture, and they bring that side to football that very few other nations do. But it's yet again another clean sheet. I think that goal the other night was one in the last 8 games, is the only one they've conceded. Yeah. So they're very, very well set up.
That's what he has instilled in them, though, when he's come in through qualification, and that's why it surprised me in the first half that they were getting counter-attacked on time and time again, especially in those full-back areas. And I know Fagner isn't first choice, but they look so vulnerable, and that hasn't been them. This isn't a typical Brazil team that we've seen down through the years, playing off the cup, letting those forward attack-minded players just play at will. There's a real structure to how they play, and the only one that is given that little bit of leeway is Neymar.
And you could actually make the point that they'd probably be stronger with Marcelo back as left full, but that wouldn't address the issue that he's talking about. They'll still be vulnerable defensively in that area.
Yeah, but still, I mean, we know that in recent World Cups anyway, in the modern game, that all successful World Cup campaigns are built on solid defence. Even when Spain won it with tiki-taka very much at the centre of what they did, they still had a very solid defence.
Yeah, very much so. And I think Miranda coming in, it's just a solid, experienced campaign. I had mentioned the other day about David Luiz 4 years ago. This is a different kettle of fish, it really is. Goalkeeping-wise, I'm very impressed with him. I'm not quite sure Hope is, but I think he's spoiled for choice in terms of who he can pick. Casemiro in front of Fernandinho to be able to bring on and short things up in front of that. It's a solid outfit. They know what they're doing. They let the opposition have it, drop deep into that. Then they have the threat of a counter-attack as well. They've got a lot of strings to their bow. OK, what about Paulinho? Because during that game you mentioned him numerous times and it wasn't always positive. No, not always. What he does, he just stands in very advanced areas. Top of the show, I'd mentioned it. Right up alongside Jesus, Firmino if he's on. But then when he gets into that area, he's not comfortable having the ball with his back to play. He lets runners run off him. When he sits in alongside Casemiro, it's not natural to him to track runners like this. Gets caught the wrong side, he should be angling his run. It doesn't end up costing Brazil on this occasion. But again, he doesn't convince me in any real aspect of midfield play apart from athleticism and making runs from deep when the opportunity arises. Again, sloppy in possession here. I just think he's got better options within the squad. As he lays this ball off, Casemiro, just again, what's he doing? Not quite sure. I don't think he's quite sure. Then he comes alive because that's what he wants to do. He wants to run. He wants to join in and be that second striker. He's a firm favourite. He starts practically every game. But I think as Brazil are creeping towards going far in this tournament, he is going to be an issue.
OK, and we'll see if that might become an issue against either Belgium or Japan, because, of course, that's who they will be meeting in the quarter-final stages. That game will be played in Rostov-on-Don later this evening.